Your bird returns from a race, 300 kilometers of flying, navigation through changing weather, over unfamiliar terrain, using instinct and learned patterns to find the way home. The flight itself was perfect. The bird maintained good speed, conserved energy efficiently, stayed oriented through clouds and wind shifts. After 7 hours of flying, your loft area finally comes into view. The bird is tired but still strong. It descends toward the familiar neighborhood where home should be. And then everything goes wrong. The bird circles your street, flies over your loft, doesn't recognize it, circles wider, sees other lofts, other rooftops, lands on a neighbor's roof 2 houses away, sits there, confused, uncertain. Minutes pass, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Other birds from your club are arriving at their lofts, entering traps, registering times. Your bird is still sitting on the wrong roof, trying to figure out where home is. Finally, after 30 minutes, the bird jumps off the neighbor's roof, flies back toward your loft, lands on your roof, walks around, eventually finds the trap and enters. The clock records a time 30 minutes slower than it should have been. You've lost 30 to 50 positions in the race because your bird couldn't identify your loft quickly from the air. This scenario happens every single weekend in pigeon racing. Not to beginners only. It happens to experienced fanciers who never realize their loft entrance has fundamental problems that confuse returning birds. These problems are invisible to humans standing on the ground looking at the loft. But to a bird approaching from altitude and speed, these problems make the difference between immediate recognition and costly confusion. Today we're covering the 3 most common and most serious loft entrance mistakes that cause birds to land on wrong roofs, hesitate excessively before finding home, or even get completely lost when they're within meters of their own loft. These mistakes are correctable. They don't require expensive modifications or construction, but they do require understanding how birds see and identify lofts from the air, which is completely different from how humans see lofts from ground level. Let's start with the most common mistake: trap color and visibility from altitude. Here's what most fanciers do. They build a loft. They install a trap entrance. The trap is made from wood, painted the same color as the loft, or painted a dark neutral color like brown, dark gray, or black. The loft blends into the surrounding buildings. The trap entrance blends into the loft. From ground level standing 3 meters away, the loft and trap look fine, clear, visible, no problem. But your birds aren't approaching from ground level 3 meters away. They're approaching from altitude, maybe 50 to 200 meters up, descending at speed, scanning the landscape for home among dozens or hundreds of buildings. From that perspective, your loft that looks clear from the ground is nearly invisible. It looks identical to 20 other buildings in your neighborhood. The trap entrance that's obvious from ground level is completely invisible from altitude. This is the single most common cause of birds landing on wrong roofs or hesitating extensively before identifying home. They can't see the loft distinctly enough to recognize it with certainty. Let's understand why this happens and how to fix it. From altitude, birds rely heavily on visual pattern recognition. They're looking for distinctive visual characteristics that identify their specific loft among many similar structures. Color contrast is one of the most powerful visual identifiers. A loft that contrasts sharply with surrounding buildings is visible from much greater distance than a loft that matches surrounding colors. Most neighborhoods have buildings in similar color ranges: brown, gray, beige, white, brick red. These are common building colors. If your loft is painted in these common colors, it blends into the background from altitude. Birds see a cluster of similar-looking buildings and have to search carefully to identify which specific one is home. Now imagine your loft has a roof or trap entrance painted in a bright, unusual color: bright red, vivid orange, bright yellow, or pure white. From altitude, this distinctive color immediately stands out from the surrounding brown, gray, and beige buildings. Your bird sees that bright color from half a kilometer away and knows instantly, that's home, that's where I need to go. This is why top fanciers like Leo Heremans paint their trap entrances or landing boards in distinctive bright colors. Heremans specifically uses red, and he keeps it exactly the same red for decades. His birds learn from their first training flights that home is marked by that specific shade of red. When returning from races, they see that red from distance, recognize it immediately, and approach directly without hesitation or confusion. The color choice matters less than the distinctiveness. Red works because it's uncommon for roofs and stands out strongly. Orange works for the same reason. Bright yellow works. Pure white works if surrounding buildings aren't white. The key is choosing a color that contrasts sharply with your neighborhood's typical building colors and that doesn't appear on nearby structures. Some fanciers worry that bright colors will attract attention from neighbors or authorities or will look aesthetically unpleasing. These concerns are understandable but misplaced. Your bird's ability to identify home from altitude is more important than human aesthetic preferences. If local regulations prohibit certain colors, work within those constraints but still maximize visual distinctiveness. If neighbors complain, explain politely that the color serves a functional purpose for your bird's navigation. The trap entrance specifically should be the most distinctively colored element. This is where you want birds' attention focused. Paint the entire landing board area in your chosen distinctive color. Paint the frame around the trap opening. Make that entrance area as visually obvious as possible from above. Some fanciers go further and add visual markers near the trap. Flags, colored cloth, bright objects. Gaston van de Wouwer mentions hanging a red cloth near his trap that's visible from 500 meters. This additional marker provides redundant identification. Even if the bird doesn't initially see the trap color, it sees the flag or cloth, recognizes that marker, and approaches. The principle here is redundancy and visual identification. Don't rely on birds recognizing one subtle feature. Give them multiple obvious visual cues that all say home is here. Distinctive roof or trap color, plus additional markers like flags or cloth, plus distinctive loft shape if possible, creates multiple identification pathways that make recognition fast and certain. Now let's discuss the correction protocol. If your current loft and trap blend into the surroundings, you need to repaint. Choose a bright distinctive color that contrasts with your neighborhood. Purchase high-quality exterior paint in that color. On a day when no races are scheduled and birds won't be returning, repaint the trap entrance area thoroughly. If possible, repaint the entire roof in that color. If repainting the whole roof isn't feasible, at minimum paint a large distinctive section around the trap entrance. Let the paint dry completely. Then before the next race, give your birds multiple training tosses from the race direction so they see and learn the new color. Don't change the color right before a major race. Give birds time to adapt to the visual change. 2 weeks of training with the new color is sufficient for birds to learn the new identification pattern. Once you've established a distinctive color scheme, never change it. Consistency is critical. Birds learn specific visual patterns. Changing those patterns creates confusion. Louis van der Velde emphasized keeping his trap color exactly the same for decades. This consistency allows birds to develop absolute certainty about what home looks like. Never repaint in different colors unless absolutely necessary. If you must repaint, use the exact same color and shade. The second major mistake is trap orientation misaligned with race route direction. This is more subtle than color visibility, but equally important. Here's the problem. Races come from specific directions. If you race in Belgium, races typically come from the south, from France. If you race in the UK, races come from France, from the south or southeast. Every region has predominant race directions based on geography and race organization traditions. Your birds learn the race direction through training. They fly toss routes and races repeatedly from the same general direction. They build mental maps where home is located north or northwest or whatever direction it is relative to the race routes. When returning from races, birds approach from the race direction, which means they see your loft from a specific angle inside. Now here's the mistake. Many fanciers build lofts with the trap entrance facing the wrong direction. The trap faces north, but races come from south. The birds approach from the south, see the back or side of the loft, don't see the trap entrance from their approach angle, and have to circle around the loft to find the entrance on the opposite side. This circling wastes time and creates confusion. Sometimes birds land on the roof and walk around looking for the entrance that should be visible but isn't because it's facing away from their approach direction. The solution is straightforward. The trap entrance should face the direction races come from. If races come from south, the trap should face south or southeast, so birds approaching from race direction see the entrance directly as they approach. They don't have to search or circle. They see home and entrance simultaneously, approach directly, land and enter. This seems obvious when stated, but many lofts are built with trap orientation determined by convenience, available space, or aesthetic preferences rather than race direction. The builder puts the trap on whichever side of the loft is convenient for construction or where there's space for a landing board, without considering that birds will approach from a specific direction. If you're building a new loft, trap orientation should be determined primarily by race direction. Figure out which direction your races come from. Orient the loft so the trap entrance faces that direction. Everything else about loft design and placement is secondary to this principle. If you have an existing loft with trap facing the wrong direction, you have two options. Option 1. Relocate the trap entrance to face the correct direction. This requires construction work, but solves the problem permanently. Option 2. If moving the trap isn't feasible, compensate with extra strong visual markers on the side of the loft that faces the race direction. Large distinctive colors, flags, or other markers that birds see from their approach angle, even though they can't see the trap entrance directly. This guides them to the correct loft, after which they can circle to find the entrance. Louis van der Velde's approach exemplifies strategic trap orientation. He built his loft on a slight elevation with the trap facing directly toward the race direction. Birds returning from races saw his loft slightly elevated from surrounding buildings and saw the trap entrance straight ahead as they approached. No confusion, No circling, direct approach and entry. This thoughtful orientation contributed significantly to his bird's success. Wind direction is a secondary consideration in trap orientation. Ideally, the trap shouldn't face directly into prevailing wind, because birds approaching into strong wind have difficulty landing on the landing board. But race direction is more important than wind direction. If you have to choose, orient trap toward race direction and accept that sometimes birds land in windy conditions. You can partially mitigate wind problems with landing board design, overhangs, or windbreaks, but you can't mitigate poor orientation with race direction. The third major mistake is scent confusion or absence of familiar scent markers. This mistake is the least understood because most fanciers assume pigeons navigate primarily by vision and don't realize scent plays a supporting role in loft identification, especially at close range. Pigeons do have functional sense of smell. It's not their primary sense for navigation, that's vision, and probably magnetic sense, but olfaction does contribute to their ability to identify home, especially when close enough to detect scent. Research has shown that pigeons can distinguish different locations by scent, and that they use olfactory cues as one of multiple identification methods. Here's how scent problems happen. A fancier cleans the loft thoroughly the day before a race, scrubs everything with strong disinfectant soap. The loft smells clean to humans. It smells like chemicals to birds. The familiar scent profile of home, the smell of wood, feed, droppings, and feathers that birds associate with their loft, is gone or masked by strong artificial scent. The next day, birds return from the race. They approach the loft area using primarily visual navigation, but at close range, 50 to 100 meters, scent starts to register. They expect to smell home's familiar scent. Instead, they smell strong soap or disinfectant. This creates subtle uncertainty. This looks like home, but it doesn't smell like home. Is this the right place? That uncertainty causes hesitation, circling, or even landing on nearby roofs that might have more familiar scent profiles. Similarly, if the trap area is dusty or contaminated with scents from other sources, cats, other animals, chemical sprays, this creates scent confusion that makes birds less certain they're at the right location. The solution isn't to never clean your loft. Hygiene is important for bird health. The solution is to clean strategically and maintain familiar scent markers. First, don't do major cleaning immediately before races. Clean midweek when no races are scheduled for several days. This gives the loft time to re-establish its normal scent profile before birds return from racing. Second, when cleaning, avoid extremely strong-smelling soaps and disinfectants if possible. Use milder cleaning products that remove waste and bacteria but don't create overwhelming artificial scents. If you must use strong disinfectants for health reasons, do so several days before races and air out the loft thoroughly. Third, maintain scent markers in the trap area specifically. Some fanciers keep pieces of loft wood or old feed bags in the trap area to provide consistent familiar scent. Gaston van de Wouwer and others keep a small cloth or material in the trap area that absorbs the loft scent over time. This cloth isn't washed regularly. It's left to accumulate the loft scent profile, providing a strong familiar scent marker at the exact location where birds need to identify home. Fourth, consider using subtle natural scent additives that become part of your loft scent signature. Some fanciers use cedar chips, lavender, or other natural materials that create a distinctive pleasant scent that birds associate with home. The key is consistency. Whatever scent profile you establish, maintain it. Don't change scents frequently. Let birds learn one consistent scent signature for home. This scent strategy is subtle, and its effects are harder to measure than visual identification, but top fanciers who've refined their lofts over decades consistently mention scent awareness. They understand that birds use multiple sensory cues for identification, and they optimize all of them, not just vision. Now let's discuss how these three mistakes interact, because often fanciers make all three simultaneously, creating compound identification problems. Imagine a loft painted dark brown matching surrounding buildings, with trap facing north while races come from south, cleaned with strong disinfectant the morning of race day. Birds returning from that race face triple challenges. They can't distinguish the loft visually from altitude. They approach from the wrong direction and don't see the entrance. When they get close, the scent is wrong. This bird has very low probability of finding home quickly and high probability of landing on wrong roofs, wasting massive time or getting completely lost. Now imagine the corrected loft. Bright red trap entrance and roof section visible from a kilometer. Trap facing south directly in line with race approach direction. Subtle familiar scent maintained through old feed bags in the trap area. Birds returning from race see the distinctive red from distance, approach directly from the south seeing the entrance clearly, and at close range smell the familiar home scent. Identification is immediate, landing is direct, entry is fast, race position is optimal. The difference between these scenarios might be 30 seconds to several minutes in trap time, which translates to 20 to 60 positions in a competitive race. Over a season, this difference determines whether you win or struggle. These corrections aren't expensive or difficult. They just require understanding how birds identify lofts and fixing the problems that interfere with that identification. Let's discuss testing and validation because after making corrections, you need to verify they actually improve birds' ability to identify home. The test is simple. Do multiple training tosses from race direction at varied distances. Observe how quickly birds recognize the loft from altitude. Do they approach directly, or do they circle searching? Do they land on your roof or on neighboring roofs? Do they enter the trap immediately or hesitate? Record these observations before making changes and after making changes. Compare the data. If birds are approaching more directly, landing on your roof consistently, entering faster, the changes improved identification. If behavior hasn't changed significantly, either the changes weren't sufficient or there are other problems interfering with identification. Be patient with changes. Birds need time to learn new visual patterns. If you've changed colors or markers, give them 2 weeks of training with the new setup before racing. Don't expect immediate perfect results, but within 2 weeks, birds should adapt to well-designed changes and show improved identification behavior. Now let's address some advanced considerations for specific situations. If you live in a very densely built area where many lofts are close together, visual distinctiveness becomes even more critical. You need to make your loft stand out not just from general buildings, but specifically from neighboring pigeon lofts. This might require more dramatic color choices or larger visual markers than would be necessary in less dense areas. If you race both short and long distances, trap orientation needs to consider the primary race direction for the races you care most about. If most important races come from one direction, optimize for that direction even if occasional races come from different directions. You can't optimize perfectly for all directions, so prioritize the direction that matters most for your racing goals. If local regulations restrict exterior color choices, work with what's allowed but maximize contrast within those constraints. If you can't paint the roof bright red, maybe you can paint the landing board white or use allowed colors and high contrast combinations. Regulations are constraints to work within, not excuses for poor visual identification. If your loft is in a rural area with few surrounding buildings, visual distinctiveness is easier because there's less visual clutter. But you still need distinctive markers. The principle remains the same, even if the specific implementation differs based on environment. Let's discuss maintenance of these improvements, because one-time fixes aren't enough. Paint fades over time, especially in outdoor exposure to sun and weather. Bright distinctive colors become dull and less visible. You need to repaint periodically to maintain visual distinctiveness. Inspect your trap area annually. If colors are fading, repaint before racing season. Visual markers like flags or cloth need replacement when they become worn or weather damaged. A faded, torn flag is less effective than a bright new flag. Replace markers as needed to maintain visual impact. Scent markers need monitoring too. If you're using cloth or material to maintain familiar scent, replace it if it becomes excessively soiled or if you've had to clean it. The goal is familiar scent, not dirty conditions. Balance hygiene with scent consistency. Trap orientation doesn't require maintenance unless you're modifying the loft structure, but periodically verify that vegetation, new construction, or other changes in your environment haven't blocked birds' visual line to your trap from the race approach direction. If a tree has grown and now blocks the view of your trap from the south, you need to trim that tree or modify your visual markers to be visible around the obstruction. Now let's talk about the championship perspective, because quotes from top fanciers reveal how seriously they take loft identification. Leo Heremans, painting his trap entrance red and keeping it exactly that same red for decades, shows extreme commitment to visual consistency. He understood that birds learn specific visual patterns, and that changing those patterns creates confusion. His birds knew with absolute certainty what home looked like from any distance and any angle, because it always looked the same. Louis van der Wouwer, building his loft positioned for optimal trap orientation toward race direction, shows strategic long-term thinking. He didn't just build a loft where it was convenient. He chose location and orientation specifically to optimize his bird's approach and landing. That thoughtfulness in initial construction prevented problems that many fanciers struggle with for years in poorly designed lofts. Gaston van der Wouwer hanging a distinctive red cloth near his trap that's visible from 500 meters shows understanding of redundant visual marking. He didn't rely on birds recognizing one subtle feature. He gave them an obvious distinctive marker that screamed "home is here" from distance. His birds never wasted time searching because the marker was unmistakable. These top fanciers achieved their success partly through superior birds and training, but also through superior loft design that made identification and entry as easy as possible for their birds. They removed obstacles, they optimized everything, and their birds responded with fast trap times and minimal losses. You can implement the same principles regardless of your budget or current loft setup. You don't need an expensive loft to have optimal loft entrance. You need paint, which costs 20 euros. You need thoughtful trap orientation, which costs nothing but planning. You need scent awareness, which costs nothing. These improvements are accessible to everyone and dramatically improve results for anyone who implements them. Let's discuss common objections, because some fanciers resist these recommendations. Objection 1. My birds know their home without special colors or markers. Maybe they do, but the question isn't whether they eventually recognize home. The question is how quickly they recognize it and how certain they are. Every second of hesitation is lost. Race position. Every moment of uncertainty is increased stress. Why make your birds work harder when simple improvements make identification instant and certain? Objection 2. Bright colors look ugly, and my neighbors will complain. Function over aesthetics. Your racing results matter more than neighbors' opinions about your roof color. Explain politely if asked, but don't sacrifice your bird's performance for human aesthetic preferences. If neighbors truly have problems, there are usually compromise solutions like bright-colored objects rather than bright roof. But don't default to poor visibility just to avoid potential complaints. Objection 3. My trap faces the wrong direction, and I can't rebuild the loft. Then compensate with extra strong visual markers visible from the approach direction. You don't have perfect orientation, but you can still improve identification dramatically through color and markers. Work within your constraints, but push those constraints as far as possible toward optimal. Objection 4. Scent doesn't matter for pigeons. They navigate by vision and magnetic sense. Scent is secondary, not primary, but secondary cues still contribute. At close range, when birds are deciding between your roof and a neighbor's roof, any identification cue helps. Scent is easy to implement and has no downside. Why not optimize it even if the effect is modest? None of these objections justify ignoring loft identification problems. The improvements are too easy and too effective to skip based on objections that prioritize convenience over results. Finally, let's discuss how to implement these corrections starting today. First, evaluate your current loft honestly. Stand in your street and look at your loft from various angles. Does it stand out visually? Go to the location where your race routes pass, maybe 500 meters from your loft in the race direction, and look at your loft from that perspective. Can you clearly identify it from distance? Is the trap entrance visible? These observation exercises show you what your birds see and whether there are identification problems. Second, choose your correction priorities. If your trap color is poor, that's priority 1. Get paint and repaint immediately. If trap orientation is wrong, decide whether moving the trap is feasible or whether you'll compensate with markers. If scent might be problematic, add scent markers to the trap area. Third, implement changes systematically. Don't change everything simultaneously. Change trap color first. Give birds 2 weeks to adapt through training, then add additional markers if needed. Sequential changes allow you to evaluate each change's impact. Fourth, test after changes. Do multiple training tosses and observe whether birds' behavior improved. Are they approaching more directly, landing more consistently, entering faster? If yes, the changes worked. If no, analyze what might still be problematic and refine further. Fifth, maintain improvements. Don't let paint fade, markers degrade, or scent profiles change unintentionally. Annual maintenance review before each racing season ensures everything remains optimal. These steps transform your loft entrance from a potential problem into an optimized identification beacon that helps your birds find home quickly and certainly every time they return. The investment is minimal, the return is substantial. The difference in racing results is measurable. The 3 mistakes are clear: poor trap color and visibility, wrong trap orientation, scent confusion or absence. The corrections are clear: bright distinctive trap color, trap facing race direction, consistent familiar scent markers. The results are clear: birds identify home faster, land accurately, enter immediately, register better times, waste less energy, experience less stress, and get lost less frequently. Implement these corrections. Watch your birds' trap times improve. Watch your losses decrease. These aren't minor tweaks with marginal benefits. These are fundamental improvements that solve major problems most fanciers don't even realize they have. Your birds are doing their job, flying hundreds of kilometers home. Do your job by making home unmistakably clear from distance, correctly positioned for their approach, and familiarly scented when they arrive. That's what champions do. That's what you should do. Fix your loft entrance and let your birds show you how much better they perform when identification is instant and certain. The loft entrance, the final critical meters of every race. Make those meters as easy as possible. Your birds will thank you with results. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.